morning and happy Friday. I'm so glad that you all took the time out of your day to spend about an hour with me to learn about responsibility without authority. This is the final installment, I guess, for this month-long series that I've been doing. And so I hope that you all have gained some good information, some validation, been inspired for maybe some conversations and some introspection throughout this month. And I'm really excited to continue on today. But before I do, if you would be interested in participating in our post survey, please put your email address in the chat. The post survey is just a few questions long. It's not mandatory, but it does help me to navigate future trainings as I develop more information for you. So your feedback is very important to me, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so if you are interested in participating in that, just put your email address in the chat and I'll send you the survey after our time ends today, okay? So today, responsibility without authority. So this will probably take about a half hour to get through, and then we'll have some time to chat afterward. All of my trainings, of course, are recorded. So if you're wanting to stick around for the conversation, that part, of course, will not be recorded, so we can just kind of continue with building community and learning from one another, because I feel that I can give you all the information that I can give you, but the real learning happens in community with one another through sharing lived experiences. So I do hope you stick around for that afterward. And if there's something in here that I talk about that you want to revisit, or if you want to share this information, all of our recordings are posted on our YouTube channel and our website, alabama-lifespan-respite.org, usually by the first of the week. So I do my trainings on Fridays, and usually by Monday or Tuesday, they're posted online. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. What is the purpose today? Okay, so caregivers, you guys are often responsible for outcomes. And though there is a lot of authority there is some authority that you probably don't have, especially if there are multiple family members involved, siblings, other spouses, even just the systems in place. They can kind of hinder you having that absolute authority over the care. And there can be some conflict there. There can be some friction that happens because of that, right? So we're going to kind of explore that imbalance and how it contributes to your day-to-day stress and your strain. And we're also going to kind of touch a little bit into some of the systemic failures that impact caregivers across the globe, or at least across the nation. I can't speak for other countries, but I can speak as an American. So responsibility without authority, this is a well-documented driver of stress for many roles, not just caregiving, but management, parenting, things like that. It can be kind of a stress trigger in a lot of spaces outside of caregiving, but we're going to, of course, focus on caregiving today because the stakes are really, really high, right? Not just for the care of your loved one, but the sustainability of that care and also how you survive through this leg of your journey, emotionally, physically, and even socially, right? There's a lot that can change and shift as a caregiver, and it impacts every role you have, right? Impacts every area of your life. So today's session, of course, is about something that you all typically experience, but maybe you don't have the words for it. And so it's not going to be therapy specifically, but it can be kind of therapeutic in the way that it validates. But this is mostly just for education, okay? We're going to kind of look at caregiving through a structural lens rather than a personal one. So you're welcome to just kind of listen, step away if you need to, add things to the chat if you'd like, as we continue to go on, okay? So why does this matter to touch on this subject? Well, if you are responsible for things, but you don't have that complete decision-making power, that can be really frustrating, right? And it can be very exhausting. And typically it goes unnoticed, right? I've talked with many caregivers over the years, and it seems like when there's a gap or when there's friction, the impulse is to self-blame, to self-correct, to take on ownership of the flaw or the friction. And I'm hoping that today, by the end of it, you realize that this is not a moral failing. This isn't a personality flaw. This isn't something that you just need to try harder for. Okay. There's a lot of components that can add to this imbalance. Okay. Many of you all describe feeling frustrated, exhausted, on edge constantly, right? Even when you're doing everything that you reasonably can, you still kind of feel this sense of deficiency or inadequacy, right? And a lot of times that feeling comes from being responsible for outcomes, right? So health outcomes, safety outcomes, daily functioning outcomes, but you don't really have all the authority that you need to make key decisions. Excuse me. And so, of course, when responsibility and authority, they're misaligned, that increases your strain, right? So in psychology and organizational research, this kind of mismatch is associated with chronic stress, burnout, and role strain, which we kind of talked about previously in some of the other trainings this month. And so we're just kind of going to continue to build on those themes, okay? And so when you're held accountable for outcomes but lack control over decisions, that nervous system stays heightened, right, in vigilance. And so over time, that can lead to chronic fatigue, exhaustion, irritability, or even just that sense internally that you're not doing enough. And we all know that we are probably doing more than enough, right? But it almost always seems like we're lacking in that capacity. And so that can be really, really disorienting. And it can also feel kind of confusing, right? What am I supposed to control? Feeling guilty when things don't go well or blamed for circumstances that you didn't create, right? And so understanding this imbalance can help explain why caregiving can feel so heavy, even when effort and care are high, right? You're doing all the things and you're doing it well and you're doing it sustainably and you're doing it consistently. But then you can still also feel as if you're not doing enough. And so that discord inside can be very, very exhausting. So caregivers carry responsibility for outcomes, right? In very, very real ways. So this can include responsibility for health and safety, again, day-to-day functioning, coordinating services and care, right? And making sure that plans are followed through. You're often acting as advocates for your loved one, especially if they're children or if they're nonverbal or if they're in a cognitive decline and they can't make those choices for themselves and they can't advocate for themselves. Guess what? Now that's another hat you get to wear, right? And so you're also tracking changes, communicating concerns, adjusting plans when things aren't working, right? You're almost always in there filling in the gaps. But notice a lot of these tasks involve that coordination and that monitoring. You're often acting as informal case managers without formal authority, compensation, right, or institutional support, right? There's no onboarding for this job. There's no employee handbook. There's no orientation, right? It's just hit the road and see what happens, okay? And even if you're not making a lot of the financial decisions, which many of you are, but even if you aren't, you're still the ones managing the consequences when things go wrong, right? And that's not just financially, that's, in all areas, right? You may have to confer with other siblings for mom's care, but then if mom's care goes south, who's there to clean it up? Who's responsible to take ownership of those consequences, right? Even if it was a joint decision, if you're the one in the home doing the lion's share of the work, you're going to be the one that's expected to kind of cushion the brunt of anything that maybe doesn't go according to plan, right? So you have to kind of clean up the mess, even if you're not 100% responsible for it, okay? And that, of course, can lead to a lot of frustration. It can lead to a lot of resentment over time, right? And it can lead to a lot of self-blame as well. So here are just a few signs that the responsibility and authority imbalance could be affecting you. Okay, of course, this is just 4 little bullet points. It's not an exhaustive list, but just kind of listen and see if it's something that you can identify with. So maybe you're experiencing chronic guilt, even though you've done your part, right? I've done all this stuff and it's still hard, or I've done all this stuff and it's still not working, or I've done all this stuff and I'm still not getting the resources that I need, right? And so you can kind of feel guilty for that, even if it's not 100% your fault, right? Or anything that you have control over. You're having difficulty resting because you feel on call. I hear this all the time. Well, I would love to get 8 hours of sleep, but I can't because I have to be sure that I'm alert and I'm ready, right? And just in case. Maybe you're feeling resentment towards systems or providers, right? This is a big one. And I think that this takes a lot of our internal effort. It takes a lot of our mental load because there are just so many things that are out of our control. And the systems and the providers that are in this space that are supposed to be helping you, some of them are more concerned about, billing your insurance than they are about really giving you the care that you need, right? Not everyone, but, our systems are kind of set up to kind of, err on the side of profit rather than actual care. Or if you live in a county that maybe is under resourced, which unfortunately is very common in our state, then there's systems in place, but they're not enough, right? I know there's a lot of home care agencies in Huntsville, and there's a lot of assisted living facilities in Huntsville where I am. But the cost is so astronomical. I can't even say the word astronomical. That's not even an option for you, right? So that can be it can be very easy to build some resentment there, right? And maybe you're feeling blamed for outcomes you did not control, right? So maybe there is a joint decision with, maybe some siblings about maybe you're like, well, I want to put dad in a facility or an assisted living place. If we all pooled our resources, we could get this together. And then everyone who's not in your space decides, no, we think it's best if dad stays with you. And you can't afford to do anything on your own. You need everybody on board. And so what do? Right? And then you're kind of in this space that you're not in control, but you have all the responsibility, but you don't have the authority. Okay, so that's kind of what we're talking about today. All right, so when I say authority, what do I mean? We're talking about formal decision-making power, access to resources, and the ability to change systems. Okay, so this isn't just necessarily within the family system. This could be in the system at large, right? The public systems, the social systems that we have. And many of you do have a lot of influence, obviously, but influence is not the same as authority, okay? So despite carrying all the responsibility, often your authority is limited. Medical decisions may rest with providers, right? Hey, I think mom needs this medication, and your doctor says, nah. They could have a good reason for that, right? Obviously, they went to school and they were trained and all that good stuff. But they make those decisions typically, right? Policies and systems dictate what options are available to you, right? Maybe you don't qualify for state benefits because, you make $100 more a month, right? So you're still in a bind, right? There's financial, legal, or institutional constraints that shape what is possible. I know one of the main complaints or frustrations I hear from parents in this work, I have a special needs child, but all the services end once they hit 10 or 12, right? My child's 35, they have level 3 autism, and there's nowhere for them to go. What happens when I die, right? That kind of stuff. And then you're also required to work within these rigid systems that aren't designed with your capacity in mind, right? Or maybe, your financial capacity, like there is a wonderful place for your loved one to be, but it costs 10 grand a month. I don't know about y'all, but I don't got that kind of money, right? So this creates those situations where you're expected to ensure good outcomes, but you're operating within boundaries that you don't choose and you can't always change, okay? So that gets very, very frustrating, and it can be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Discouraging. There we go. It can be very discouraging. So it is important to understand that oftentimes this imbalance is structural, not personal, okay? So what do I mean by that? Many of our systems, unfortunately, rely heavily on your unpaid and unsupported labor. Okay, that's just the fact of it. In fact, the whole reason the Alabama respite reimbursement program exists is because the system realized that it would be cheaper to pay you in that capacity to get those little breaks than it would be to invest in systems that can take over for you. Okay, that's just the reality of it, unfortunately. So they rely on that undersupported and unpaid work. I don't have the exact statistics right now, but it's $1 billion potential revenue, right? If you were getting paid to do what you do. And that's, a heavy bill for our systems to pay. And so they would much rather just rely on you doing it for free. Okay. And then you absorb that responsibility without giving that formal authority, right? You don't have those resources. You don't have that decision-making power. A lot of these things are kind of decided at the top, and then the trickle down is up to you, right? So I say this not to criticize or critique our systems at large, even though as a social worker, I absolutely am, wink, wink. But to really validate, okay, you all and the work that you do. And it is hard, and sometimes it can be very unfair. But I also want to kind of loosen up the reins of guilt that kind of guide us around, right? I just need to try harder. I need to work harder. I need to be more patient. I need to be more kind, okay? That could be true for some of you. But in my experience, most of you all are trying as hard as you can. You're as competent as you can be. You're as proactive as you can be. But you will just, because of the systems in place, you will run into walls over and over and over again. Okay. So I don't want you to beat yourself up for navigating a complex system. Okay. Because it is complex, very much so. And many healthcare and social systems function with an assumption that caregivers will absorb those gaps, time gaps, staffing gaps, communication gaps, right? And this is what we refer to sometimes as that invisible labor, okay? And this is not just exclusive to caregiving in this capacity, right? This is true for a lot of that unpaid care and unpaid labor that we have just kind of really leaned on as a society, right? And so because it's unpaid and often untracked, it becomes normalized, right? It's just normal. This is how it works, right? And so if we think this is normal, this is how it works, we're less likely systemically to create a solution if we don't really realize that there's a problem, okay? And so the weight that you feel from all of this doesn't come from you being weak or you being incapable, okay? It comes from the structure of the role itself, okay? And why am I even saying this? Well, because again, recognizing this can reduce self-blame and it can help you see your experience a lot more clearly, okay? You all are so hard on yourselves. I mean, I am a therapist here. I've been doing care chats. I've been doing education for several years with you all, and you guys do not give yourself enough grace. And that's why I want to really do a lot of these types of educations for you, because you see, yes, it is hard. Yes, there are systems that are, making it more difficult for you. But this isn't a personal flaw that you have, okay? And not having that additional guilt will help with your stress, will help with your caregiving, okay? But when something goes wrong, it's not uncommon for you all to internalize it as a personal failure, even though it's a structure that was never fully resourced, right? And we can think structures, outside of our family systems, but also structures within our family systems too, right? And oftentimes I hear, well, my brother said that, he doesn't want to help with mom because he's got too much going on. Okay, that may be true, but a comment like that kind of deflates or discredits all that you have going on and all that is continuing to go on as a caregiver, right? So it's kind of like, why do you need my help? I've got other things to do, right? It can be very invalidating. All right. So let's touch a few real world scenarios, okay? This dynamic shows up in a lot of caregiving situations, okay? So following care plans that you didn't design, but you're expected to enforce, okay? So this could be from a doctor, which of course I always advocate that you follow doctor's orders. But there's a lot of stress or lack of authority in some of those spaces too. Okay. Sometimes your doctors will give you something and they're going to say, well, let's just see what happens. But then that adds on the additional management task that you now have, right? You have to manage the dosage. You have to watch for any signs of, how are they going to respond to this medication? How is it going to interact with their other medications? Is it going to impact their sleep? Is it going to impact their appetite? Is it going to impact their capacity to be continent or not, right? So they write the prescription, but then you have to manage the blowback, okay? Advocating strongly without having final decision-making power, okay? So you can say, I think A, B, and C needs to be done, but maybe the care team is saying, no, it's got to be, these other things. Managing the consequences of system limitations, right? Well, I can't work because I have to take care of mom. And I can't hire somebody to come in and take care of her for me because it'll cost me 15 grand a month to do that. And I can't afford 15 grand a month because I can't work, right? What do you do with that, right? And then, of course, being held accountable for outcomes without adequate support, right? I tried this new medication. It made mom aggressive. I can't, give this to her anymore. And then someone's like, well, just don't give it to her. Or, well, you just have to be more calm. Or maybe try getting her out of the house. Or you just have to be firm and put your foot down. If you're taking care of anyone who has cognitive decline, especially if it's in dementia care, putting your foot down doesn't always work, right? You know that. But people who aren't in it don't know that. And so they'll give you all kinds of advice that's not applicable to your situation, right? So an example, you may be told to ensure medication compliance, but you don't have the authority to change those prescriptions, to adjust the dosage, or to address the side effects, right? So the expectation remains, but the tools do not. You're basically being told you just have to endure, okay? That's not a solution and it's not sustainable, but it's the reality that a lot of you are in, right? And so these scenarios, of course, are very frustrating because they place you in a position of responsibility without control. Okay. So what can we do about this? Okay. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that can be done. Systemically, you can advocate, you can write your representatives, and within family systems, you can have a family meeting and get everything out on a spreadsheet, or maybe even hire a mediator to come in that space. So you can do those things, right? But a very practical, simple thing to do, which is very on theme for what we've been doing this month, is identify where responsibility and authority differ, okay? It is very useful to clarify which decisions you can influence and which ones you can't, okay? This isn't going to fix any system, but it does reduce that confusion. The goal here is not to overnight change the world, okay? The goal here is to reduce your cognitive load as much as you can with the goal of stress reduction, okay? Tiny fixes to reduce maybe even 5 to 10% of your daily stress, okay? So documenting observations, right? Keeping a care journal can be very, very useful for caregivers because I think a lot of the times we start with these specific needs, and then as the diagnosis progresses, your kids hit puberty, things like that, where things shift the expression of the diagnosis to become a little bit more intense. You adapt to that, right? And then you learn that dance, and then the choreography changes and you learn that dance. And so over time, you don't realize how much of that role has expanded, how much the responsibilities have become, larger than life, right? So when we write it down, sometimes you go, oh, holy cannoli, I didn't know I was doing all this. I didn't know I was carrying all of this. I didn't know that I could delegate some of this, right? Because you're just so used to adapting and putting one foot in front of the other that you didn't really have time to sit and really, portion it out in your mind to see what's actually going on. So of course, it doesn't fix the system, but it does reduce that confusion, okay? So I do have a worksheet for this that I'll send with the post survey. So if you don't want to do the post survey, but you want the worksheet, just put your email in the chat and I'll send you both and you can just take what you want. Okay. So you just do something simple, like 2 columns, right? Kind of like, back in the day, we used to do pros and cons lists on whether we're going to dump Johnny or not, right? So this is kind of, we're going to do 2 columns, right? What am I responsible for and what I actually have authority over, okay? And so seeing the difference on paper, that's going to reduce that self-criticism, okay? It's like, I want to do something about this, but I don't have the authority to do it. So I'm going to stop beating myself up for it, right? And it can clarify where advocacy is needed, right? Not self-blame, but how can I advocate for myself in this space? How can I advocate for my loved one in this space? Okay. And another strategy is shifting from how do I fix this to what is realistically within my role, right? Sometimes we're carrying more than we need to carry because we didn't realize we had the option of setting it down. Okay. And that could be within your caregiving role or just external roles that you carry, right? Some of you will get into caregiving and you don't drop anything else off your plate. And so here you are trying to, basically orchestrate an entire buffet on one little plate. And it's just there's not enough room for all of that, right? And so that could be really helpful to say, like, I used to be able to do these things. I would like to do these things, but I can't right now. And that's okay, right? We just kind of turn the page into what we can do and we pick that up later, okay? So that shift alone, what's realistically within my capacity to do, that can reduce that emotional overload, right? If I was just stronger, if I was just more patient, if I just got enough rest, right? Sometimes that's not the solution. Sometimes the solution is I can't do this at all anymore, right? And just let it go, okay? So when it's possible, seeking collaborative approaches with providers, family members, and organizations can help distribute responsibility more realistically, okay? And some of you may do this little exercise and realize, wow, I didn't realize how much I was doing. I do deserve a little break, right? Because some of you feel like, well, I'll take a break when when I'm on the verge of collapse, not realizing that you've been on the verge of collapse for 6 years, right? Write it down. It can really change the way you see things, okay? All right, so I told you this is going to be kind of short because they have been all month by design, so we have time to converse afterward. So here's some key takeaways that I hope you heard while I was speaking. Responsibility without authority is inherently heavy, okay? And I say that because some of you think this shouldn't be this hard. Yes, it should, because it is. There's no way around it, okay? It's not that some people just have, an easier time because they have more skills and they have all the patience in the world, okay? Some people, of course, personalities, you may have more patience than others, but just because somebody seems to be handling it well doesn't mean that it's not difficult, okay? So I don't want you to compare yourself to other caregivers and think, well, that's just who they are. I'm sure, if you sat down and talked to them at night when everybody was asleep and it was just them, they would probably have a different story to tell you, right? The imbalance is systemic and it affects many, many caregivers, okay? And understanding this dynamic reduces that misplaced self-blame and unrealistic expectations, okay? I remember I was at a support group with someone from M4A. It was a care coordinator for their area agency on aging. And she said that her father had experienced a dementia diagnosis and she was caring for him. And the time came where the needs expanded beyond her capacity, okay? And she was very, very distraught by this because she didn't want to, have to move her dad out of her home into a care facility. And she said that one of the nurses told her, you are doing the work of an entire team of people, right? Because the nurse knew how many people it took to take care of one patient, right? 3, 4, 5 people, different scopes of education and skill, right? Nutritionalists, doctors, neurologists, all that, right? Cardiologists. And she's like, you've been doing the work of an entire staff of people. It's okay to say it's too much, right? And that one little bit of perspective calmed her nerves enough to say, well, he needs this care, so this is what we're going to do, okay? Clarity around roles and limits support more sustainable caregiving over time. And that's the whole goal, right? It's not about fixing all your problems overnight. It's not about making caregiving easy. It's about making it sustainable. Okay. And when responsibility exceeds the authority that you have, you will often overcompensate by overfunctioning. Okay. So, of course, this works short term. Everybody, at least at some point in their life, has probably hit this road before where they have to kind of give it a little bit more than they normally do. They have to overfunction to compensate for something, and that's normal. But this is not a long-term sustainable strategy, okay? You cannot overfunction indefinitely, okay? And you all know this probably more clearly than I do, right? So sustainable caregiving requires clear role boundaries, shared responsibility as you have the capacity, okay? As you have the help, right? Because some of you don't have anybody that you can share these responsibilities with. And so maybe the goal isn't having a family meeting with people. Maybe the goal is, taking the respite, doing things that you enjoy that helps repair your nervous system, right? Making sure you have the nutritional food to help fuel the system that you have. Okay. So there's always a little bit that we can do to make things 5 to 10% easier on ourselves. We don't always have a whole village. Okay. But we can be mindful about how we care for ourselves. Okay. So here's my contact info. My phone number, I work from 8 to 4 during the week. I'm off on Wednesdays. So if you call, leave me a message and I'll get back to you. This is my email address, jstang@ucphuntsville.org. If you want to reach out to me for resources, for links to other trainings, for a care chat, or if you want to get on my referral list for free mental health services, we are offering that now for caregivers. And if your loved one is needing some mental health services, we also have another therapist on staff named Kendra, and she can see care recipients. But my grant only covers caregivers. So if you're looking for some assistance in that capacity, please reach out and I'll direct you. Or if you just have questions, I'm happy to answer them, okay? And if you go on our website, alabamarespite.org, you will find all of our caregiver recorded trainings there. You'll also find a database for low cost or free respite opportunities in your county. And we are always updating that. So if you have one in your county that's not listed on that database, please let us know and we'll add it, okay? And these are not for-profit respite providers, okay? We do not legally have the right, or not the right, but we don't legally give out referrals to for-profit spaces, but we do collect nonprofit, low-cost, usually community respite programs that you can pick from, okay? Another thing that you can do on the website there is you can apply for our respite reimbursement program if you're not already on it. And it's just, you get a monthly or quarterly stipend that covers some respite care that you can use for hiring a sitter, maybe offset some of the costs if you take them to, if you got kiddos and they go to like a camp or something like that. So if it's respite to you, it's respite to us. And so, and there's no income requirement or anything like that. It's just literally if you are full-time unpaid caregiver, just fill out the application, okay? What else can you do on the website? You can sign up for our newsletter. So if you like these trainings, most of you probably already are on the newsletter. But if you're not, you can sign up for the newsletter and get that every month. I only send you one a month. I don't like to spam anybody, but you can share that with friends and family as well. All right. So let me go ahead and stop my share here.